Good morning and welcome to Discover Church. It's good to see you guys. My name's Jernigan. It's my great privilege to be the pastor here. If I haven't met you yet, man, I would love to talk to you. Come say hello. We are in a series, in a journey this summer through this idea of blind spots. And what we've been talking about is that blind spots are those things, one of two things. They're either that thing that you know about, but you don't really want to talk about it, because if you talk about it, you got to do something about it. Or it's the thing that you just didn't know. You weren't aware that it was there. And so what we've been doing is we've been going through the book of James this summer, and God has been drawing our eyes and drawing our vision to these blind spots because God wants us to know He wants something for us. He doesn't want something from us. He wants something for us. And what He wants for us is to understand what it looks like to truly walk with Jesus. And so in His love and in His grace, He gives us things in His Word to draw our attention to these blind spots, because these blind spots can be things that hinder or separate us from having as close of a relationship with Him as we would like. And so we've been diving into this and working through it. And so we're going to be talking today. The title of the message today is Don't Lean on That. Now those could be famous last words. Or it could connect to something else, and hopefully it'll bring some clarity about what we're talking about as we get into the message today. If you have your Bibles, I hope you do. We use them every time we get together on Sunday morning. Open your Bibles to the book of James, chapter 3. I heard a pastor say one time that his favorite part in the service was that moment right there, and then he hears all the pages, flipping and opening and da-da-da-da. I don't really get that. I get this. Open your Bibles. Which is okay. If you don't have your Bible, it's okay. We're going to have the verses on the screen. James chapter 3 this morning. If you're with me, say, don't lean on that. I am going to lean on this while I read this, though. James 3, and it starts verse 13. It says this: Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. What is James talking about here? Well, he's going to talk about this juxtaposition that exists between earthly wisdom and heavenly wisdom. In order to kind of help us understand that, what I want to do today is I want to share a part of my story, because a large part of my story is found in wrestling with the reality and the truth that James is illustrating right here. Because one of the things that I learned is that I oftentimes, and for a large time as a pastor, chose to lean on the wrong stuff. So I want to take you through a part of my story this morning. It was January of 2007. I was 20 years old, and I had been hired as the middle school pastor of my church. Now, before you start asking, there's lots of questions that come with that, I'm sure. But it was a full-time position. I wasn't a super genius. I didn't finish college early, no. I still had 2 years of college left. But my church had seen that I had served faithfully when I was a student, and there was a calling on my life to minister to students and to go into student ministry. And I had served faithfully and sacrificially in the church. I'd done internships, and so when the position became available, they looked around and goes, well, we don't have anybody else to do it. So how about you? And so they hired me, and I was, it was an interesting deal. I mean, it was a full-time job, first time I'd ever had one of those. I had real benefits. I didn't really know what benefits were, but I had them, and really for the first time, I mean, I was officially on the adulting train, if you know what I'm saying. And I remember sometime around the time that I had taken the position, which meant that I could finally make enough money to finally go talk to Jessica's dad to get his approval to get married. And, I was all excited about that. But I remember a conversation that I had with Jess sometime around the beginning of this whole process. I don't remember exactly when, but I remember her saying, and what she meant it in love, and it was said in love. It was also said as a warning. She said, babe, I'm so excited for you. You have done everything you needed to do to get to this point. You've served faithfully and you've put yourselves in a position to be able to do what God is calling you to do. And now God is opening a door of opportunity and he has gifted you for this. You are called to this. You are so good at so many different things. And I'm like, yes, I am. That's right, baby. You know who you going with. You give me a couple months, I'll put a ring on that finger. Just hold on. But how many of you know that that's not comfortable? That is an uncomfortable but in a conversation. She said, but here's my concern for you, babe. My concern is that because you're so gifted, that you will rely on your own ability and you won't rely on God. To which I immediately responded, psh, girl, what are you talking about? Man, I've been walking by faith. God done taking care of this and taking care of this, and I'm reading my Bible. I'm doing all this stuff, man. I'm serving. I'm giving. I'm a broke college kid, and I'm giving way above a tithe to my church, and it's to the point my mom's like, hey, you don't have to do that. I was like, yes, I do. God said it's his, and I go, okay, you can have it, right? And I'm doing all this thing. I'm like, girl, what you talking about? I ain't going to rely on my own strength. Of course I'm going to rely on God. Until I didn't. Because I didn't, things went really, really bad for me. And so what I want to do today is I want to share part of that story to help you kind of understand what this looks like, at least what it looked like in my life. Now I'm going to tell you something, and it's going to sound like I'm bragging, and I really don't mean it to be that way, but I know it's going to sound that way. So brace yourselves. I was a really, really good middle school pastor. I was well positioned for it. I was 20 years old. I was tall. I was goofy. I was immature. I liked hanging out with middle school kids. Like, it reminded me of my middle school days. And I just enjoyed lovingly making fun of kids without them really even being able to notice that I was making fun of them. I learned that I could, speak and preach a little bit, at least long enough to hold a 13 and a 14-year-old's attention span for longer than 5 minutes. I learned that I had some really good ideas about things that we could do to get middle school kids together and have fun. And so we would do these monthly events and just have a great time. Not everything that we did was awesome, but we had more wins than losses on the scoreboard. I'll never forget one particular event that we did. We did it every year for several years in a row. We did an all-nighter. If you've ever wondered what purgatory is like, host an all-nighter with a bunch of middle school kids and grown adult volunteers that woke up at 6 o'clock that morning to go to work and show up going, where's the coffee? And not being a coffee drinker going, I don't know. That's nasty. I didn't drink that nastiness. Did you bring it? The last year that we hosted an all-nighter, we had over 300 kids, middle school, 7th and 8th grade kids, show up to our all-nighter. I can see some of your faces right now. You're going, oh, Lord. It's like a petri dish of awful. But it was awesome. Well, I didn't really like it. That's the reason why that was the last year that we did it. I hated that event, but it was effective. And what I did not know when we had started planning the event several months prior to that, the Lee Summit School District had planned the first ever district-wide middle school dance to be on the exact same night. Yeah, why would anybody do that? And so they did the dance and we planned the all-nighter, and I heard about it and I was going, oh no, nobody's gonna come to our all-nighter. It's the middle school dance, and I got really worried about it. So then we flipped it on its head. I was really good at this. I'd take something bad and make it something good and spin it really fast. I was like, listen, y'all go to the party and we'll host the after party. So y'all just come on. And we did a service and we shared the gospel and kids got saved, and then we went running all night all over the southeast corner of our city, going and doing all kinds of different things. Monday morning, I got a phone call from the district office. Yes, may I please speak with Pastor, is it Jeriquin? That's me. That would be me. Hey, when are y'all doing your all-nighter next year? And immediately I'm like, y'all need to just pump the brakes just a little bit. I mean, hello, I'm still recovering from what had just happened, right? Like I am in full recovery mode, and I still got some volunteers I'm still trying to like pay off to get them to come back the next week to serve in our student ministry. And I'm like, well, I don't know. We don't normally start planning that until about 6 months out. And they go, oh, okay. Well, here's the deal. When you land on a date, would you please call us? I'm like, sure. Why? Well, you see, what had happened is we had so many kids leave the dance to come to your all-nighter that we were asking ourselves the question, why did we even host the dance? Now, in my young self, I was like, hold on just a second. Booyah, right? Like we just upset the fabric of society so much with what we just did that the public school system is calling the middle school pastor saying, hey, when you doing that, because y'all have upset something so much, it's messing with us, and we're going to work around what the church is doing. Hello, amen, hallelujah. And then I got a little bit older and I thought back on that. I was like, that's awful. You shouldn't clap for that. I set you up for that, I know. Right, because why? Because listen, we don't want to be in competition with the school. The school is not the great Satan. They need Jesus as much as anybody else does. We want to work in partnership with the school, not in competition with the school. But at that time, I was like, man, this is kind of awesome. I kind of know what I'm doing. If A is B and B is C, then A is C. I am awesome. Verse 13 says this, who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. Now, when I was hired, when I was 20, at that stage, as much as a 20-year-old can be, I had proven through my actions and my behaviors that I was wise for my age. Matter of fact, one of the things that I heard often is you're wise beyond your years. And what is wisdom? What's the difference between wisdom and knowledge? Knowledge is knowing stuff. Wisdom's knowing what to do with it, right? And so at the age of 20, in that season of my life, with that amount of responsibility that I had proven with my life and with my actions that I was a wise person, at least wise for the age of 20. I don't know if that's really saying much, but I felt like it was. And not only had I proven myself in that season to prove by my actions that I was wise, I had proven the meekness of wisdom. What is that? Well, meekness is a word that we don't really use a lot. It gets misunderstood. A lot of times people associate meekness with weakness, but it's not. Weakness is the absence of strength. Meekness is the presence of strength and the presence of self-control. All right, so I'll put it to you like this. I'm pretty sure that if anyone in my family, in my house that lives under my roof wanted to challenge me to a fight, I'm pretty sure I could win. I'm pretty sure. In a couple of years, I'm not so sure because my baby boy Gunner is going to be a monster and he's already using objects to hit people. Matter of fact, this last week, he picked something up and hit me with it. It bounced off my shoulder and smacked him right in the forehead. He started crying, I started laughing. He still got a little knot right there, a little black spot. I didn't beat him, he beat himself. So we don't hit people with things. Okay, it hurts. I know it hurts. Looks like it hurts. Doesn't hurt me though. Right, so what that means is that I'm bigger and I'm stronger than everyone in my home. But when conflict arises between me and Jessica, like I'm not throwing Jessica up against the wall. I'm not smacking her around. That doesn't happen in the Schwint household, right? When me and my kids get in conflict, I'm not tossing them, over my shoulder like I would if I was to get into a real fight with somebody who was after me, right? No, what is that? It's meekness. It's I have the strength to physically dominate and overpower them, but I have it under control so that when there is conflict, I can control my strength and my body to be able to engage in something that's productive. That's meekness. The meekness of wisdom is having wisdom, which is knowing stuff, knowing what to do with it, and being able to have wisdom without having to tell everybody, look at me. I'm so wise. I am the smartest person in the room, which I never understood why people thought that was a big deal, because it's assuming everybody's an idiot. So if you're the smartest idiot, what does that make you? An idiot. Verse 14 says this, but if you have bitter envy, and there's any envy but bitter envy, and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. See, what happened was because I was a really good middle school pastor, I began to believe my own press. I began to realize I'm kind of pretty good at this. Kind of pretty awesome. And when it talks about that don't boast and lie against the truth that I boasted and lied against is found in John chapter 15 when Jesus says, hey, just so that you know, apart from me, you can do nothing. Literally, there's no thing you can do apart from me. And so I developed an attitude where I was arrogant, even cocky. My posture towards things and situations and people changed. Because I began to think that I really am awesome and look what I'm doing. And I would never say that out loud. I always said the right things out loud. I always said the right things publicly. But internally, I really thought I was awesome. My bosses saw the gifts and the talent, and they celebrated the accomplishments of what happened, but they also saw the warning signs, and they tried to warn me, but I wouldn't listen. I thought, hey, man, the numbers speak for themselves, so whatever that feedback is, you need to go talk to someone else about it, because obviously I'm, hello. Ain't nobody else ever done this here. Matter of fact, our student ministry had grown to the point, our middle school ministry had grown to the point that not only were we the largest gathering of middle school students of any church in town, we were the second largest youth group in town behind only our high school department. We got to the point where we had over 120 7th and 8th graders gathering together on Wednesday nights for services. And so, I began to just have this mindset that man, this is great. And what happened is once I got to the point where I stopped pursuing Jesus and I started pursuing praise. You see, because I wasn't worried about people's acceptance. I had it because I knew I was good and people kept showing up. What happens after you get past pursuing people's acceptance, once you get acceptance, then you'll start going for their praise. And once you get their praise, then you'll go for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And it's like an empty well that you keep digging. And so what happened was I was hungry for praise. And so instead of focusing on Jesus and leaning into Jesus, what happened was I started leaning into other youth pastors and other churches and what tactics, what strategies, what things are you guys doing? How can we get bigger? How can we reach more kids? And somewhere there was a good motive of wanting to see students come to know Jesus, but there was a really big part of it that I wanted to be somebody. I wanted people to know me. And I began to pursue earthly wisdom. What is earthly wisdom? It's kind of a hard thing to succinctly describe, but I would say that earthly wisdom is this combination of what happens when you begin to rely on your own natural wisdom, your own natural instincts and intuition, and you begin to rely on your own natural gifts. Right, these are the things that you don't have to pray for. Like you could never pray again, and you would probably be good at that because God put that in you. And here's what's crazy. Even though God created you and the gift is from God, the gift is from above, what happens when we become to disassociate and disconnect ourselves from the giver, then we become fully reliant upon our own selves and we begin to look past the gift, we begin to look past the giver, and we begin to look to ourselves. Well, I must be the one that's awesome because I'm the one that's good at this and I'm the one who's naturally like this and I'm the one that they say is wise beyond their years and da-da-da-da-da, and the story continues. And so I had begun to pursue earthly wisdom and my own ideas and my own ability, and begin to look for strategies and tactics and what can we do? How can we get bigger? How can we reach more kids? How can we become more of a thing? Well, I want you to notice what James says. He says, this wisdom does not descend from above. The gift comes from above. You were created that way. But your approach to using the gift and your motivation behind why you use the gift, that's earthly wisdom, and that's not from above. He doubles down and he says something pretty profound. He says, but it is earthly, meaning it is fueled and it is motivated and it drives towards the things that the world values, but God does not. It is sensual, meaning that it is driven towards gratifying and satisfying your fleshly desires and my fleshly desires. And it's demonic. What's interesting, James is actually going to say a little bit later in his book, he's going to say that friendship with the world is enmity with God, meaning you are either going to be a friend of the world with the things you say, the things you do moment by moment, and you're going to align yourself with the world, or you are going to align yourself with God moment by moment by the things you say, the things you think, the things that you do. And there is no middle ground. In the economy of God, there is God, and then there's everything that he's opposed to and everything that is opposed to him. And so moment by moment, we are aligning and associating ourselves with either God or the powers and the forces of the demonic presence of darkness. And when we pursue earthly wisdom, when we begin to go, wow, I'm pretty smart, I kind of figured this out, I have a knack for these kind of things, and we rely upon that over our dependency on God, then it becomes earthly wisdom, and it is demonic. And the reason why it's demonic is because we then begin to use the gifts that the giver gave us to draw attention to ourselves. And God gave us those gifts so that we can direct attention back to him. And anytime we draw attention away from God, we are a part of the demonic realm of what the demonic side of things is doing to draw and divert attention away from God. Not only that, but notice what else it says. It says, verse 16, for where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are. What it's saying is that when we become self-seeking, self-interested, self-important, self-fulfilling, self-driving, selfish, and once we become selfish, then it says the confusion and every evil thing are. That's kind of confusing. I want to illustrate with a little bit more of my story to help you understand what this is talking about. I want to jump back into my story to 2011. In 2011, we made some changes on our staff. Our church at the time had about 2,500 people come into Sunday morning services, which is a lot. I mean, we're not talking, there's no small potatoes here. And with the changes happening on our staff, I got promoted up to a new role. I became the high school pastor, and as the high school pastor, with it came a few other things. It came, yes, I'm not like leading the middle school, I'm leading the high school, but it also meant I became a department head for the first time. It meant I became a boss for the first time. And listen, here's the problem. I had gotten to the point where I was really good at connecting with students, and I had gotten to the point where I could impress parents that we did things that their kids really like to do, but I couldn't lead myself out of a wet paper bag. I had a team of about 15 volunteers that was working with me, and I didn't know the first thing about hosting a meeting. I didn't know the first thing about casting vision. I was like, y'all show up and just say hi to somebody. I'll do everything else. It was the Journ show. But I was now responsible to be the boss of people who were older than me. I feel so bad for them. Even now, like I have actually sought them out and apologized. Like, I'm sorry. Y'all were like guinea pigs in this whole grand experiment. I didn't have the first clue at what I was doing. We had a host of interns that came in serving one-year internships, and we had about 30, 35 volunteers that were a part of our ministry. At that point, we had about 250 students combined between middle school and high school attending our weekly services. After about a year of observation and just trying to settle into the role as being the leader, and the guy who was leading moved on to another role, and I wasn't trying to upset the apple cart. Things weren't broke, so I wasn't going to try and fix it, so I just kind of let it be. And after about a year, I began seeking God. God, what do you want? And what I couldn't see then, when James talks about where self-seeking is, confusion and every evil thing are, I began seeking God for, God, I need some vision, direction, and wisdom about where we're going. And I developed this idea, and I thought it was from God, but that's where the confusion is. I thought I had this awesome idea that was straight from God about where we needed to go, and so I began to work on implementation. I connected with several volunteers and got them bought into the idea, and then we eventually rolled this thing out. It was going to be a pretty significant shift to the way that we did things on the high school level and the way we interacted with high school students. And so, man, we rolled this thing out and we launched this thing out. And I thought it was going to be awesome. But it was a miserable failure. Fast forward to 2013, and that became the year where everything finally fell apart. Over the course of the year of 2013, I had grown pretty angry and disappointed and frustrated with our upperclassmen. These were students that I had when they were in middle school. They'd been there forever. I had a great relationship with them. But I began to get frustrated because they weren't doing the things that I wanted them to do or that I thought that they should be doing. And I began to approach and treat that relationship with them like I was more of a dictator, like barking out orders, and I expect you to obey my commands, as opposed to being a loving shepherd and coming alongside of students and helping them take steps and encouraging them and praying with them and ministering to them in the hardship of what they were going through at home and at school and everywhere else that they were. Over the course of the year, on 2 separate occasions, my pastor called me into his office and said, Jern, why do I hear from parents that their kid doesn't want to come to youth group anymore? Because the youth pastor doesn't care about them and doesn't love them. I thought that because I was good and I was gifted, I could just write it. By the end of 2013, I wasn't really willing to acknowledge it, but I began to realize that there was a massive blind spot in my life because I couldn't remember the last time I had sat down and just read my Bible that wasn't connected to preparing for a message. I couldn't remember the last time I prayed and talked to Jesus that wasn't connected to praying for a message or praying for a meal. And this became a huge blind spot. I knew that I wasn't doing that. I knew that I wasn't pursuing Jesus, but I didn't want to talk about it. But if I didn't talk about it, it's like it didn't exist. And look, everything else is pretty and good and it's all working. But how many of you know that all that glitters isn't gold? In December of 2013, over the course of 10 days, 3 significant things happened back to back to back. I got the year-end report of our numbers. The church had grown by 10%. For a church of 2,500 people to grow by 10%, that is significant. That doesn't happen a lot in the church world. Things were awesome in the church. The student ministry decreased by 30%. I had my end of the year performance evaluation, and in that performance evaluation, my boss was like, hey, what's going on? This isn't right. He referenced the performance evaluations he had given me over the last several years that all consistently said, hey, you're doing a really good job, but you're cocky and you're arrogant. You come across like you know it all and you act like you're the smartest person in the room and you need to fix that. And this man, who was also my best friend, who I've seen him cry 5 times, less than 5 times in the 15 years that I know him, began to cry and weep for me. And through tears, he said, Jern, I don't know what's broken in you, but you are not okay, and you need to get it fixed. And if you can't get it fixed, I'm going to have to make a move. A couple of days after that, I had a conversation with one of our key volunteers. I told you about the key volunteers I invested in. Over the course of the year, one by one, they all stepped down from their volunteer role. And this volunteer scheduled a meeting with me on a Monday afternoon, and we sat down and had a conversation. She said, Jern, I'm done. She had all kinds of reasons, and they were perfectly justified. And I went home that night, and I remember just weeping like I hadn't wept in a very long time. That everything that I had come to appreciate and enjoy about being good at something and the success and the accolades and the reputation and the praise and all of the gifts that I relied upon in order to get there, over the course of the year, God systematically allowed things to break apart. And all of my gifts came to the point where I came up to the table, I cashed them all in, and I had nothing to show for it. And I remember standing in my bedroom, and I cried out to God, and I'm crying, and I'm weeping, and I'm going, God, okay, you got me. And I had this overwhelming sense of responsibility that I didn't have it twisted. I know how God works. God doesn't need me to do anything. But I felt this incredible responsibility that God had called me and God had placed me in a specific place to have an impact for His glory and for His name that would impact the lives of teenagers and their families. And I remember standing there in my bedroom crying out to God, saying, God, whatever the lesson is, I'm finally ready to learn it. Because I can't allow it to be that on my watch, a teenager will die and go to hell because I'm not the man that I need to be, because I'm not the follower of Jesus that I need to be. And if I'm neither of those things, then I can never be the pastor that you've called me to be in this part of our city, to point students to Jesus. And I sat down with Jess and just laid the whole thing out to her and explained it to her. And she sensed, she has this incredible gift of empathy. She sensed over the course of the year that things weren't going well and things were falling apart. And I just broke and poured my heart out to her. And we got down on our knees in our living room on our ottoman, and we just began to cry out and beg God, we need you. And I confess, God, I have been doing this on my own for far too long. And I remember praying two very specific prayers that night. God, would you bring us a young couple to be on our staff that doesn't have kids? Our middle school pastor got reassigned to another role, and Jessica and I had Micah and Carson at the time. The game had changed. We had two kids. I couldn't invest and pour into students' lives the way that I used to. And I knew, God, we need a young couple that doesn't have kids. And the second thing that we prayed for is, God, would you bring us 100 faithful and committed volunteers that will serve on a weekly basis? Keep in mind, we had about 30 at the time. And I went into January of 2014, and I committed myself to a season of prayer and fasting. And as I did, I didn't plan to do this. I said, God, where do you want me to go? What do I need to read? And God took me to John 15, and I stayed in John chapter 15 all month long, because it took me over half the month to get past the fourth verse when Jesus said, apart from me, you can do nothing. And it stopped me in my tracks. And God said, do you understand that I have been trying to teach you this truth and get you to believe this message since before you started this process? I was speaking through your girlfriend at the time, and I was trying to help you see, if you try to do this without me, it's not going to work out well. And I've been trying to draw you to myself, and I've placed people in positions of authority over your life, and they have spoke this word of caution. They have raised the banner and said, hey, this is a warning. You probably should pay attention to this. Yet every single time you relied on yourself, and as long as everything looked good, you wouldn't heed my warning. You wouldn't hear my voice. And so it was necessary that I deconstruct the world and the palace that you have built to yourself. You see what I had to learn? Is I had to stop leaning on my own abilities. And I had to start gleaning from God. I had to start spending time with him and gathering and collecting the nuggets and the truths that he wanted for me to have. And for the first time since college, I bent my knee and I bowed my knee in total humility and in total surrender and said, God, I don't care what happens to me. I'm yours. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care how great the failure is. I don't care about the things that are in my private life that nobody publicly knows about. I don't care about any of that. I want to be who you want me to be. Not because I want to be successful, not because I want to be known, but because I want to be yours. And I know you've called me to something. And if I'm not yours, I will never be effective to the thing that you called me to do. I'm just curious, have you ever been there? Have you ever been to that place where everything is falling apart and you don't know what to do, and all of your ideas and your strategies and your tactics and your ploys and all the stuff just doesn't work? You're called to be a parent to your kids, and it's that week or it's that month or it's that year or it's that night, and you're just like, I don't have what they need. Holy cow, I can't do this. You get into that moment where you're supposed to love and lead your family, but your family's falling apart, and every single time you try something new and you do something different, it seems to make it worse. Or maybe you've been in a position as a team leader, as a boss, as a captain, I don't know what it might be, and every single time you said something, everybody was like, oh. And every time you had a good idea, it turned out to be an awful idea. And you got to the end of it and you're like, man, why is this used to work. Why is it not working? Can I submit to you that maybe God is intervening the progress so that he can get a hold of your heart? You see, as I began to put these things into practice, I began to see what James talks about in verse 17 happen. It says this, but the wisdom that is from above is first pure. What does that mean? Well, for me, it meant that I had to start confessing some things. And I had to kind of start over in my relationship with God. I was already saved. I had to go through all that stuff, but I had to kind of start a fresh approach in my relationship with Jesus. It says that it's then peaceable. What does that mean? Well, for me, it meant that I had to go to those upperclassmen students after a Wednesday night. We dismissed the service. I said, if you are a junior or senior, would you please stay in? And I can see the eyes rolling. I can hear the, what's he want to say? What's he going to say? Da, 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 da. And I sit in front of them as a grown man and said, I'm sorry for the way that I've treated you, because I have spent the better part of the last 18 months looking at your life through a microscope when all along God was trying to hold up a mirror to look at myself. It says it's gentle. My posture and my tone towards others began to shift, and I began to develop more of a less abrasive posture towards people, and I began to genuinely care about them, not because of how what they do might benefit the thing that I'm doing and make me look better, but because God created them and made them and gave me the responsibility to be their shepherd, and so I started just caring about them. It says that it's then willing to yield. I had to get to a point finally where I didn't really care if I was the smartest person in the room. My mindset changed that, man, y'all are so blessed to have me on the team. What would you do without me? To a mindset that said, holy cow, I am nothing. I am nobody. I can't believe I get to be a part of this. Full of mercy, meaning for me, instead of having envy at the success of others, I began to become genuinely happy for other people's success, even if that meant that they did better than us at something. And I began to ask questions like, how can I pray for you? And how can I encourage you? And how can I serve you so that you can be even more successful? Then good fruits follow. My team, my bosses, the people that were in positions of authority began to see that there were these changes that were taking place, and there began to be fruit that began to grow under my leadership. Without partiality means for me that I didn't think I was somebody for who others were blessed to be around. Instead, I just said, you know what, I'll serve anybody, anywhere, at any time, because Jesus has served me and died for me. And if he's good enough to do that, if he didn't come to be served, but to serve, then maybe I just need to serve people and stop trying to lead people. And around about this time, I heard this significant quote that impacted me. It says, if you're too big to serve, then you're too small to lead. And finally it says, without hypocrisy. For me, it meant for the first time in over a decade, all of my days of being a pastor, that the person that I presented myself to be on the stage and in the lights was finally consistent to who I was when I was backstage and nobody was looking. James talks about what heavenly wisdom is all about. And here's what's crazy. As I finally began to pursue heavenly wisdom, you know what God did? God put me in situations and spaces where I could learn some new strategies and some new tactics. He began to put people around me who were good at things that I wasn't to offset my weaknesses. He began to reveal and polish gifts and abilities that I wasn't very good at or didn't know that I had. And he began to shape and mold and create me to be a much better version of who I used to be. And James closes this section with something very interesting. He says, now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. I had come to a point that I had finally made peace with God. And I began to be less concerned about pursuing the advancement of my name and my reputation and just said, God, I don't really care what happens, whatever platform you stand me on, I'm going to talk about you. And even if that platform is by myself in my bedroom or in the car or whatever, I'm not going to have it twisted. It's not about me, it's about you, because I don't have anything that you didn't give me. And fruit of righteousness began to come, not because of me, but through me. So what happened? Well, in May of 2014, we did a hard reset. We shut everything down in the student ministry, which by the way is no small ask. You go to your pastor and say, hey, so I know that you know my performance evaluations, and I know that you guys said that I need to get this right or that you're going to have to make a change. But here's the deal. I've been working on some stuff. More importantly, God's been working on me, and I've got some new things I'd like to share with you, and I don't have the credibility to ask your permission to share this vision, but you've not fired me yet, and so I'm going to share this vision with you. And so I shared a vision of what it was going to be, and he goes, well, that sounds kind of exciting. What do you need? And I said, I need an entire month where we don't do anything with students in the church. I said, oh, by the way, it's a big ask. And he goes, well, yeah, you're right. And he made it very clear that I had his approval, but in no uncertain terms, if it doesn't work, well, then this isn't going to work. And so May of 2014, we shut everything down. We spent time retooling, reprogramming. We launched, opened the doors again in June of 2014. And I want to tell you what God can do if you'll finally stop leaning on your ability and just rely on God and glean from him and let him get the glory and let him be the superstar and let him be the hero in the story. That from June of 2014 to December of 2016, our attendance more than doubled. We had well over 300 students coming on a weekly basis to our student ministry when I walked out the door. Most importantly, we saw over 200 students make decisions, commit their lives to Jesus. Over 100 students had taken a next step of baptism. We launched a small groups initiative, and we had over half of our students engaged in small groups. And the best part is the last month that we were there, it was the first month since Jessica and I had prayed that prayer in January of 2014, that God would bring a young couple, which he did just about 6 weeks after we prayed that prayer that didn't have kids. And in December of 2016, something amazing happened. Every Wednesday night in December of 2016, we had over 100 volunteers serving our students in our student ministry. Not 100 total, 100 showing up every single night. And what I could not know then, that I do know now, is that it was necessary for 2013 to happen. Not just because 2016 was going to happen, but because back in 2013, when I was in the pit of despair and I was broken and I was ready to just be, God, whatever you want, whatever you need, God saw 2018 coming when Discover Church would come, and he knew he needed a man who would be after him and was only concerned about him and wasn't concerned about being somebody, wasn't concerned about getting credit, wasn't concerned about being praised, was just wanting to be a dude called by God to do a thing. And Discover Church opened, and you're here, and it's all because not what happened in the last 6 months or 6 weeks, but because of what happened back in 2014, when I finally said, God, I'm done letting it be about me. I'm ready to let it be about you now. See, what I'm trying to tell you is that when you put the pursuit of earthly wisdom above heavenly wisdom, the end result is never going to be what you want it to be. Why? Because of this very critical truth that it took me a long time to learn, and it's this, that God's wisdom is better than our ways. That seems silly to say it out loud. It seems so simple. But hey, listen, just let me issue this challenge to you. Where in your life are you relying on your ways more than God's wisdom? I mean, no, nowhere. I'm good. I'm doing all these things, right? Okay, just you go to bed tonight. You pillow your head. And before you fall asleep, just say, hey, God, would you show me any place in my life where I have greater faith in my ways than I do in your wisdom? And listen to me, when you pray that prayer, you better get a pencil and a piece of paper out. Get your phone out and get ready to take notes, because I got a feeling what's going to happen, because what happened to me, God's going to say, well, since you asked, I've been trying to talk to you about something. I want to make this practical for us. I want you to understand that if you've hit the bottom of the barrel, if you don't know what else to do, if the company's faltering, your expertise doesn't cut it, if the marriage is struggling, if the kids are wayward, if everything is falling apart, then listen, I just want to challenge you, stop relying and stop leaning on yourself. Stop leaning on your own ways. There's something else that God wants for you that is much better. And you're going to find it in two verses in the book of Proverbs, Proverbs 8 and Proverbs 4. Proverbs 8:11 says this, for wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things one may desire cannot be compared with her. Proverbs 4 says, wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and in all of your getting, get understanding. What is this teaching us? Proverbs 8 is saying, listen, you need to understand that the greatest value of measure in your life is money. That's how you value everything. God's just acknowledging it, that's so much of what we view that we place a value on money and how much money we have. But what God is saying, listen, that wisdom is better than all the money. Wisdom is better than all the things that you can possibly want or desire or that you could ever possibly compare with it. What God is trying to help us understand is that in the perspective of God, in the vantage point of God, that the greatest pursuit, second to following Jesus, is pursuing wisdom. Why? Because wisdom has such profound value to our lives if we would believe it and trust it and follow it and pursue it. But not only that, he follows that up with the other verse in Proverbs 4. He says, listen, wisdom is the principal thing, meaning it's the foundation. It's the thing that every other thing is built on. So in the midst of you pursuing a relationship and pursuing a job and pursuing the house and pursuing the vacation and pursuing healing for that diagnosis and pursuing becoming pregnant and pursuing all of these things and all of these things and all of these things, God is saying, listen, in the midst of all of your pursuing of things, pursue wisdom, and you better get understanding. Why? Because God wants us to understand that without his wisdom, our ways will always fall short of his best in our life. And so he's telling us, listen, you need to stop leaning on your own understanding, on your own gifts, on your own earthly wisdom, and you need to start gleaning from me. You need to start pursuing me and allow me to make these little investments. And sometimes it feels like scraps, right? Like in the old days, the gleaning was something that they would do for the poor folks. You owned a farm, you would intentionally leave some of the crops on the ground as people were coming to harvest it. And the people who were poor or less fortunate would come and glean. They would grab the scraps. Can I tell you something? In comparison to all that God has and wants to do, not only in you but through you, the things you will glean in that season of despair will feel like table scraps. But to somebody who's starving, it's all you need. So how do we do this? How do we get wisdom? If wisdom is what we should be about, how do we do it? Well, I love that God gives us a promise in his word, and we read it just a few weeks ago in James chapter 1. He says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. But he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. Hey, listen, I don't know who God wanted me to come and share this message with. But if you're here today and you've reached that point of exasperation and frustration and you're exhausted, nothing seems to be working, you can keep trying to figure it out. You can keep trying to employ a new tactic. You can keep trying to employ a new strategy. You can talk to somebody and, find out what they did in that situation. None of those things are inherently wrong. But listen to me. You'll never get a divine breakthrough doing it your way. Divine breakthroughs happen when we do it God's way. And God is saying, what you need is not another strategy. What you need is what I have. And if you just ask me for it, you can take it to the bank. I'll give it to you. And I'm not going to be stingy with it. I will give it away liberally because I want you to have wisdom, because I did create you with those gifts. I created you with those desires. I created you with these things. And I did it because I created you on purpose for a purpose. So here's the deal. Stop leaning on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge me, and I will direct your paths. Stop leaning on yourself and start gleaning from God. And if you're here today and you go, you know what? I don't really know how I got here. I don't really know why I'm here. I don't really have a relationship with Jesus, but I'm here. Can I just say that I don't really believe that you would be here if you weren't looking for something. I don't know your story. I don't know everything that's going on in your life. I don't know how or why or what you need or why you need it. I don't know any of that stuff. But here's what I do know. If you're here, it's because God is drawing you. If you're here, it's because you're looking for something. And if you're here, God says, in the presence of two or more, there I am also in the midst of them, that God is here and God is drawing you to himself. And he wants nothing more than for you to be able to know what it is to have a personal relationship with the God who has what you need and is willing to give it if you would have the faith in him.